right, Ruaidhri O'Connor of the Irish Independent is in studio. There's lots of interesting rugby news at the moment.
More than there should be for...
It's the quiet time of the year.
It's supposed to be, yeah. It doesn't really happen, certainly not this summer. Maybe just the nature of a World Cup summer, but but the Johnny Sexton news, the 20's going well, and even the Rugby Championship coming up next week. It's a 12-month season now, rugby. It doesn't really take a break.
How many tickets for the IRFU do you get for €138,000?
The 10-year tickets?
Yeah.
They're... I suppose on national radio.
I never tried to tap any of my friends in RTE up for tickets for Ireland matches.
Well, even a World Cup package would have been nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary. I was watching the PAC committee and rugby just popped up. It was like, can we not get it? You know, can we not have one scandal go past? But then the Johnny Sexton news arrived, so I put me back on point. But yeah, it's quite something, isn't it?
So Johnny Sexton, the statement has come out this afternoon from the EPRC. It says misconduct complaints against the Leinster rugby player Johnny Sexton and against Leinster rugby arising from the Champions Cup final have been lodged by the EPCR after thorough fact-finding and careful review of Sexton's behaviour towards match officials after the match. In accordance with regulations, the EPCR disciplinary officer has submitted misconduct complaints so that an independent disciplinary panel can determine whether any misconduct has been committed by Mr Sexton through his behaviour and Leinster through failing to exercise reasonable control over Mr Sexton. The complaints have been referred to the chairman of the independent disciplinary panel, who is from England, and is to assistants who are from Australia and Portugal, and it's all going to happen by video conference on July 13th. The EPCR said they'll be making no further comment. This has been speculated upon really since the week after the final. Is it a surprise that it's got this far?
I think the longer it dragged on, the more you felt there was something to it, because the night of, really all the focus was obviously around the game, but also this half-time spat that took place outside the dressing room, which was juicy. And you know, I think we all expected, and EPCR gave us a statement on night saying they would investigate that spat. There's no mention of it in the statement. That seems to have gone away. That was, you know, much ado, a very interesting nothing, but much ado about nothing really. But I remember Dave Kelly, I was filing my match report. Dave Kelly, my colleague, was sitting beside me in the stadium, and he said, "Look at Sexton, he's going after the ref." And I mentioned him in my match report, but I didn't think a whole lot more of it because there was so much else going on that night. But it emerged subsequently, and it's been very interesting the way the story's gone on. Firstly, it's 6 weeks since the match. It's an awful long time to keep anyone waiting or in the dark about this. A letter was sent about 3-4 weeks ago to Leinster, indicating that they wanted information from them around this incident from Johnny Sexton. Still, it's taken, and I guess they say it's a thorough. What are the words they use? It's a thorough and detailed investigation into this, but it's taken an awful long time. I mean, even the fact that the hearing's in 2 weeks' time means that almost 2 months will have elapsed since the game. So I think it's unfair on Johnny Sexton personally. I think it's unfair on Ireland. I mean, there's a big show happening in a couple of weeks' time. There should be clarity around this. I mean, players get banned within a couple of days of matches in the regular season, and while I accept EPCR staff are allowed to go on holidays and stuff like that, there should be a skeleton staff there who are able to get this done quicker. But having said that, the fact that they've gone this far is very worrying for Johnny Sexton, I would have thought, because this means that they wouldn't have come with nothing, you would imagine. They clearly feel like he has a case to answer. They've appointed a King's Counsel, a senior counsel, and a Portuguese official to this. That they're treating it very, very seriously, as they would always. I'm not saying that's very significant, but it's a big thing for him to have to go through, and it's very close to Ireland's first warm-up game, so it's potentially disruptive. I mean, when City AM broke this story, and again, like, City AM wouldn't have a track record for breaking rugby stories. This came out in a very strange way through kind of a fairly obscure London website that seemed to have video footage and a lot of information from within the corridors of power, which suggests someone has just basically lost patience with Johnny over the years and decided this was enough is enough. But when it came through through them, it seemed to have a lot of weight behind it, and I think we're seeing now that there is a lot of weight behind it.
So we don't have the full details of what the official misconduct complaint is. Remind us what exactly he's meant to have done, because I think most people have seen some footage post-match of him approaching the referee. It didn't look as though he was in his face. It didn't look like it was going to get physical, but are there other things that have happened that
I think it's what he said. I think it's what he said to the referee and the way he said it. I would think. I mean, it says, after thorough fact-finding and careful review of Johnny Sexton's behaviour towards match officials after the match. So that's what they're looking at, and I mean, none of us heard what was said. There was some finger pointing. There's a second video of him going up to the officials again as he walked off. We have to remember, of course, that Johnny Sexton wasn't involved in this match.
Well, how important is that part of this?
It's pretty significant.
He's not a coach. He's not a player. That essentially he's a third party. It's Johnny Sexton.
Yeah, he's an interested third party, but he is. He's not
made his way onto the pitch to abuse the referee.
Yeah, he's in a suit with a pair of white runners. He stands out quite the Infantino look, and it stands out quite significantly from the stands even. And he is a world figure. He is, within this context, he is the most recognisable man on the pitch. More recognisable than any of the players that played that day in some ways. So, he is the club captain. So he could argue that he does have a role as part of but he wasn't involved. He wasn't part of the 23. He wasn't part of the coaching group. Even if he was, he really has no right. And we do see it, but we have seen.
Do we see it?
We see, from players involved, yes. We've seen it from Johnny Sexton.
From players involved, but
that's what I mean.
I wasn't surprised to see Sexton on the pitch after the game. It's the Aviva Stadium. He knows his way around it. The game is over.
Yeah, and it would have been players from La Rochelle's strawberry party on the pitch as well. That's not even, but for him to go and make his case to the referees, certainly, and this suggests there was. That he maybe went over the top in the way he did that. I mean, we can't say that for sure just yet. We haven't got a written judgment or anything like that. But certainly the suggestion is that he did. It seems like they feel he stepped over a mark, and that's the case that he has to answer. Why was he on the pitch? Why was he? I think that's fair. It's fair enough that he's on the pitch. Why did he approach referees? What did he say to the referees? Was he aggressive towards them in any way? Certainly, there's no physical contact or anything like that. But there have been a couple of very long bans handed out this year. For players who've made comments towards referees in these tournaments. So I don't expect him to get hit by anything like a 10-week or something crazy like that. But even if he misses 1 or 2 warm-up games, he's only got 3 warm-up games, 4 pool games guaranteed left in his rugby career. So anything he's ruled out for is a blow. And I think he was going to, because he hasn't played since the England game on March 18th. I think I would have expected him to play a pretty big role in Ireland's warm-up games. I don't think he was going to be rested. Certainly for all of them, I think he would have played in at least 1 or 2 of them. Plus, that you need to build rhythm into a tournament. So the scope for it to disrupt Ireland is quite significant. Leinster also are being cited for failing to control him, I think the words are.
Would that suggest that for players who aren't in the matchday 23, the onus is on the club to ensure that they behave themselves?
Yeah, failing to exercise reasonable control over Mr. Sexton, who is a 37-year-old father of 3. He's not a child. I mean,
again, the language around it
control, that's behaviour and control, so that he lost control. Is that the suggestion? I mean, again, it's maybe a bit of semantics, but it is. This is all we have to go on right now.
Look,
but
we need to be careful that we're not hypocritical when how many conversations do we have about respect for referees throughout all sports, and just because Johnny's pissed off at the end of a massive game with some decisions that didn't go in their favour doesn't make it right.
And the players who were on the pitch who had medals at stake didn't do it, so there's a case there to be answered, and his behaviour does need to be reflected upon, and just because he's the Ireland captain and the Leinster captain and a legend of the sport shouldn't protect him from that. I mean, I would hate to see him banned for anything that would impact on his World Cup. I don't think he deserves that in any way. But and O'Gara has said that he doesn't want this pursued, and he was on the other side of it. But I guess he wasn't the one getting the mouthful from Sexton. So look, we'll find out more in 2 weeks' time. But it's really significant.
I'm sure Leinster will have the finest lawyers in the country on this one, and there'll be no shortage of people putting their hands up to protect Johnny Sexton. Even the timeline around this. Is there a referee's report like in soccer that goes in straight after the match?
So, yeah.
So how does
certainly my impression at the time, and there would have been a lot of reports, some of my name in it saying that he would escape sanction, but my impression at the time was that Jaco Piper wasn't really keen to pursue this. He's going to come across Sexton again at the World Cup at some stage. And that's where my antennae is up a little bit about, the first video of Sexton's behaviour towards the ref came out through a South African Sunday news, an Afrikaans Sunday newspaper in South Africa, which often is first with the news from the SARU. Then it's come through this obscure enough London website, certainly in rugby terms. I mean, it may be massive, but I hadn't come across it until these stories. So it was being leaked from somewhere, possibly within England, I don't know. Has there been within officialdom, a bit of lost patience with Johnny Sexton, because he does have
Wouldn't
a record.
be a surprise.
Wouldn't be a surprise. Is it in the interests of some of Ireland's rivals to kind of undermine them in the build-up? That wouldn't be a surprise. That pressure would be applied in some way. Look, these things do happen behind the scenes, but at the same time, we can't shy away from the fact that Sexton did go up to the match officials. He's filmed doing it twice. I saw it with my own eyes at the end of the game when he had no hand actor part in the match itself. He obviously was emotionally invested in a huge way, and I think look, they wouldn't have sent this release out. I think a lot of people talked about EPCR having no teeth at the end of the after the Ulster debacle and the game taking place in the Aviva because of the frozen pitch up in Ravenhill, and the investigation was a bit of a whitewash after that. So I wonder, have they just decided they don't want to be accused of that again, or whether they're under pressure? There's a lot going on behind the scenes.
But also the way this is being handled, that if we're talking about Johnny Sexton getting a 4-week ban or a 6-week ban or anything that impacts his World Cup preparations, that 4-week, 6-week ban is irrelevant if this process happens quickly. Like,
but it would be a match ban rather than a week ban, so it's definitely, even if it happened 2 weeks afterwards, Ireland.
The delay in time doesn't make any difference to his suspension.
I wouldn't have thought so, but because it would, everyone would have seen through that. I mean, we have seen teams registering players for games that they would never have played in to get them out of match bans, and maybe Leinster will have a hastily arranged friendly against Connacht in the week before the World Cup opener just to get them off, and they might try that. But that's well down the line. But I do think any ban will rule them out of our game. I don't think it's going to be 3 weeks and it stops before Ireland's first World Cup game or out like that. I think it's gone this far, and it's quite it's a serious, the wording of the statement suggests that he's got a significant case to answer.
I couldn't believe when I saw that the Irish squad were already in camp ahead of the World Cup.
Yeah, they got 2 weeks off.
They got about 4 weddings in and then straight back in. Is Sexton in camp at the moment?
Yeah, no, he is. They're all in camp. They're all training. I believe he's training fully. Or certainly was when they first come in. I think what they're doing at the moment is largely, I am watching the odd RFU video just to see what's going on and see if just try and spot if there's anyone who shouldn't be there in there. But there's it looks like they're mostly doing S&C work, kind of normal pre-season stuff. I think what they do is they got 2 weeks off to go through a block. They take another time. They rather than give them 4 or 5 weeks off at once, they try and intersperse the weeks off during their thing to give them a rest during it. So I think they found that's the better way of doing it. But it does, the provinces are back as well, which just seems unseemly considering they're not playing any games.
Doesn't start till when? October?
Late October, mid-October. So but they got to keep in condition and they got to be ready for that World Cup.
Munster going to play Crusaders?
Yeah.
At first glance is incredibly exciting, and then you realise it's the day after Ireland play France in the Six Nations.
Yeah, and it's like all of these Munster friendlies that they have a really good record of going out and getting good games and they may play this in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and it wouldn't surprise me if they got a very good crowd to it because there's such a difference to it. Crusaders are in pre-season, and Munster, and they're playing Bristol Bears as well, and Munster have no game that weekend, so it's a good money spinner for them. I think it will be an exciting fixture. Munster will still have a tranche of players who won't go to Ireland camp. Some will be released that week and might be allowed to play because it's a good game for them to play in. They beat South Africa with a similar enough team this
kick-started the entire season, really.
Absolutely, yeah. They beat the Maori, they nearly beat New Zealand with a team that was missing around international, so the fans won't be put off by the fact that their Ireland stars won't be there. Look, and they're billing it as the Clash of the Champions, which is it's good marketing, and it's bound to grind some gears up in Leinster.
Leinster can't do that, can they?
Well, it's not. Munster has stolen the march on everyone else by getting this fixture. I think. Rob Penny is taking over as Crusaders coach. Scott Robertson's moving to the All Blacks, so there's obviously a personal connection there. But I can't remember if the Crusaders are still sponsored by Adidas. I think they might be. I stand to be corrected on that, but there's a couple of maybe running connections between the two organisations. But it's a great fixture, and I think it will put bums on seats and bring revenue in, and it all goes towards that playing budget, and it's a smart bit of business.
So the Under-20 World Cup is on at the moment in South Africa. Proper old school rugby. Jesus Christ, the pitch was the worst pitch I've seen in years.
Yeah, well, they tend to play these games back to back on the same pitch, which is fine if you're playing in the Northern Hemisphere summer, or even in certain parts of South Africa. If you're up in the High Veld, you'd probably be okay, but Parle in the Western Cape has been battered. I got an email from a reader about a week ago saying it hasn't stopped raining here since the URC final. It's just been relentless. There's been flooding and the pitch is a bog, and they're playing and they haven't changed tack, and it's been really unfair on the players, I think, that they haven't changed tacks, because Ireland played there this morning, but South Africa play Italy. They're playing now, I think, as we speak, and that's the third game on that pitch today. It's crazy. Like,
and it was barely playable after Ireland beat Australia this morning.
Yeah, it was barely playable when they started. Like, because the 3 games took place there 5 days ago. Like, I mean, we saw like the best stadium in that area is the Cape Town Stadium. The pitch was atrocious for the URC final. So, it's a problem. But it forced the team to find a way to beat Australia, and they did. Maybe it helped.
I'm burying the lead by talking about the pitch first. So Ireland beat Australia by 30 points to 10. This is after the draw against England at the weekend. They basically had to win this to have any chance of progressing. Yeah,
and bonus point, really, like the draw wasn't actually a bad result if they beat Australia, but that was always the caveat. It reduced their wiggle room, but the fact that England and Ireland picked up 3 points each means that if they win their other 2 games, they're both going to go through to the semi-final. 4 teams qualify, the top 3, the pool winners, and then the best runner-up. And the 3 points you get for a draw actually gives you a really good chance of being a best runner-up, because all of the best runners-up, all of the runners-up will have lost 1 game.
Right.
So that's. So by Dermot Mangan scoring a try in the last minute off a line-out maul, a scrum penalty line-out maul, the way Ireland scored 3 of their tries, it was it was a tap penalty. Sorry, they tapped that one. They'd been repelled at the maul, but by Dermot Mangan scoring that try, it pretty much gives them 1 foot in the semi-final as long as they beat Fiji next Tuesday. Very good, strong performance. It's a really big Irish team. It's much bigger than previous teams Ireland have had. Paddy McCarthy, the Leinster, he switched from tight head to loose head. Joe McCarthy's younger brother. His brother, excellent in the front row, some unbelievable carrying. Brian Gleeson in the back row was absolutely sensational. The Munster back row.
Well, the Irish pack killed them.
They absolutely killed them. Yeah, they turned the screw. Australia lost their tight head prop to injury 36 minutes into the first half and never really recovered. He's a bit of a monster, and they just lost all their strength in the scrum, maul, close in contact. They went old school, they went biblical, and it really worked for them. And they've demonstrated a different way to win, which is a really good characteristic. And I think this is a really talented group of players who, like, New Zealand got hammered by France today. I know we can draw correlations. Ireland beat France in the Six Nations. France have the latest of the Tuilagi clan playing in their second row. He's 18 years old and 145 kilos. He's an absolute, he was man in the match. He was unbelievable. I think it's going to be a Northern Hemisphere winner to this tournament. Maybe South Africa will get into the mix, but like, New Zealand aren't that strong. Australia looked flashy at times but weren't that strong either. Like, Ireland have a chance to win this, to cut my long point short. As the Grand Slam winners, they look really well primed. If injury, and Ruan Quinn went off with an injury today, doesn't get the better of them.
Sam Prendergast was a real focal point of attention going into this, because I think some people still feel maybe there's a couple of injuries here and there, and maybe he gets parachuted in. Who knows? It's been a bit of a roller coaster for him over the first couple of matches.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the conditions are tricky for any out half, and there have been undoubted touches of class. I thought there was some moments in our first half where he just rose above it and he was able to play ball. There's been a couple of skewed kicks, there's been a couple of poor conversions, but his line kicking for those line outs was really, really good. Whenever Ireland won a penalty, he made the most out of it. I think when you come out at the end of it, the ledger's going to be very positive for him. Like, he's a class player, and maybe the expectation and the pressure that's come after his Leinster appearances and being touted as a potential World Cup squad member has affected him a little bit. And it's been a long season. He played in this tournament last year, or the version that they had at this tournament last year, so he's played a lot of rugby.
And in a way, that's what this tournament is for.
Yeah.
Like, actually having even more pressure on him is only going to work for him in the long run.
He's trying to play attacking slick rugby on an absolute bog of a pitch, and he's, by and large, he's getting the most out of his talent on it. Like, there have been moments, but it's not easy out there, and he's playing against good players. It's I think I'm generally impressed by him every time I see him. Even when he makes the mistakes, it doesn't seem to faze him. He reminds me of Crowley, like that he just gets up and makes the next play, and his mindset seems to be very, very good. And look, it's hard kicking on a pitch like that. It's not going to be easy. They've one more game on that pitch. I think that the knockouts will be up in Stellenbosch, which you'd hope won't be. I mean, it's in the same area, it's had the same weather. It'll be affected, but it won't be maybe as bad as Parral has been. But it's character building. It's doing them no harm, and like, ultimately winning a World Cup would be amazing for these players. But what Irish rugby needs from this team is to get as many of them through, and some of them look ready to go next season. And the sevens ticking along nicely as well. Men's and women's team qualified for the Olympics. Yeah, for the first time Ireland will have 2 men. Obviously sevens hasn't been in that long, but when sevens first got into the Olympics, Ireland didn't really have a programme. They built it from the ground up. David Nuciforo's pet project, and it's come to fruition, and they deserve to be there. And I thought what was most notable in it was last time they really didn't show up in Tokyo. They weren't able to land the blow. They kind of their medal was when they qualified, and they kind of left it all out there, and they weren't able to tailor their conditioning because they left it really late. They qualified in, I think, June, and the Olympics was in August, and it was really hard for them to back it up, whereas now they've qualified a year and a bit out, so they can relax, celebrate, go on holidays, come back next season and build everything towards Paris.
Does it get to the stage ever with the Olympics where a year out you start looking at players who aren't involved in the seven setup who could add something to it?
Well, like you could look at someone like Jordan Harmer, for example, who's not getting into the senior setup and is not getting his game regularly for Leinster, and mate, like there's talk because they're hosts that France will redeploy Antoine Dupont for next season, which would be remarkable. But like, you know, he is that maybe that's what the sevens would need. So I'm trying to think of anyone in the senior setup.
That.
Oh, absolutely are. And like, I think it would be, you wouldn't want any of the kind of really established guys to be turfed out for that. But we've seen this week with the Women's World Cup squad, there's no room for loyalty in elite sport. If someone can do a job for you and you can get him in who's good enough, then you got to go for that player. I remember when it first came out, people were talking about would they be able to get O'Driscoll playing sevens, when sevens became a focus for the RFU. I mean, like someone like Gary Ringrose, I mean, it's not going to happen with someone who's really like a centrally contracted established player, I don't think, because you'd have to take them out of the 15s programme for a season, and Ireland remains, on the men's side at least, a 15s country. With 15s is where the money is generated, and the Six Nations, all that stuff. But certainly, like, I'm sure players' heads would be turned and would fancy, could Joey Carberry, fancy a run at the sevens? Like, could that be the thing?
With
that
a
gives
little
them
squad here ourselves now.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just
very unfair to players who've literally just qualified, but
absolutely. But even
sprinkling a stardust might be.
One thing James Topping has done is that he's been quite ruthless. The coach, former international, has been quite ruthless in terms of his selection, and he has, some players have had time out and had to come back because they've been challenged, and that's ultimately come through in this. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be players putting their hands up. It's pretty like getting to Paris and potentially winning an Olympic medal is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and this team are quite capable. Like, they've got some of the best sevens players in the world: Terry Kennedy, Jordan Conroy, experienced players like Harry McNulty, Billy Dardis. They have a lot of what of the ingredients to get at least onto the podium.